Melanesia and then Polynesia. And you can see there's a lot of ocean and many small islands, but all like what you see here, these are all just seamounts, but then small areas, there are also a lot of seamounts, but then you have actual islands in there as well. And then I want to zoom into this area, the Mariana Trench. You might have heard of the trench. It's the deepest trench in the world. It's here. It's the Challenger Deep. It's 11 kilometers deep, and you have the two plates. The Pacific plate goes over the Mariana plate, and so it's a subduction zone. And then that's how this arc is created. And you have many small islands. And this, the southernmost island, that's called Guam, and that's where I used to live for over 20 years. And yeah. The other islands, they're also inhabited, and then the islands up north, they're usually don't have any inhabitants. And then again, this is Micronesia, but here you can see the different states. Again, it's Micronesia itself, it's just the region, and then you have different states. You have the state of Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, Marshall Islands, then there's Nauru, over here is Kiribati, and then Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. And Guam is a U.S. territory, like Puerto Rico or American Samoa. And then a lot of the other states, they're independent now, but they're U.S. affiliated. So they have like U.S. dollars, and people that live there, they can freely travel to the U.S., but they still are, they have their own passport, but they have a lot of, like a strong relationship with the United States. And so my research is in the Federated States of Micronesia, and that consists of 4 main states. There's Yap, Chuuk, Pohnpei, and Kosrae, and my current research is in Yap State. And what you see here, these bigger islands here, Chuuk, Pohnpei, and Kosrae, they are high islands, so they're volcanic islands, and then all the other speckles here, they're all either just reef islands or atolls. And my research is specifically about atolls. And here just shows the global distribution of atolls. It's basically between 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south of the equator, where you have coral reefs. And then about atoll island formation. So it starts out with a volcano, it subsides, then you have first a barrier reef, and then later it subsides more, and then you have this white thing is limestone built on top of it, and then eventually you have an atoll formed. And usually they're round or kind of round, they have like different shapes. But what's also important to know, it kind of looks like from a volcano, the crater, the caldera, but the reason you have the lagoon, it's not from the original crater, caldera, it's actually the limestone, and when it's exposed, when the sea level is really low, then it's just the dissolution, so the dissolution creates that bowl shape. And here's an example of one atoll that's like the very almost perfect atoll. It's Nuku'oro in Micronesia, and that's 7.5 kilometers in diameter. But then in comparison, there's another one, the shape is very different, and it's 120 kilometers from the northwestern tip to the southeastern tip. And that's Kwajalein Atoll, and it's one of the biggest atolls in the world. And the atolls are only a few not kilometers, a few meters above mean sea level. So they're very vulnerable to sea level rise, and so elevation is very important. And why do we care about atolls in general? One is for the natural resources. They're used for coconuts or copra production. Then we also have it for the guano. And then in historic times, because they had a lot of birds, the feathers were used for all the hats, especially in Europe and in Asia. And then they're also strategically very important because, as you saw, there's like a lot of ocean around. And so, especially the US used a lot of these islands during the World War II. So Here you see Ulithi Atoll. It was this really big lagoon, and so it was like natural harbor, and it was very close to Asia. So it was like the perfect area to keep a lot of the military ships to attack Asia. And then Bikini Atoll, you might have heard from 1954, there were a lot of nuclear bombs. And then even today, a lot of these atolls are used still by the US military for military bases. And even to this day, they have like nuclear testing going on. But the islands are also very important habitat for seabirds and sea turtles, but also for humans. So a lot of these islands are inhabited, and they're very rich in culture. But they are threatened by climate change. And the three major things are coastal erosion, flooding, and then also the flooding leads to saltwater intrusion because you only have a very small freshwater lens. And so when you have saltwater coming in, then the freshwater is contaminated, and that really affects the plants. And so it's harder to grow certain crops. And so one of the big questions is, will these atoll islands disappear? That really caught my interest, working and traveling in the area, and then seeing the islands firsthand, and then reading articles like these. And so previous research, they looked at plans for shoreline changes. And here's one of the first bigger research papers that came out in 2010. And you have historic aerial photographs. I'm sure several of you have done similar work. You're using the aerial historic photographs, you overlay them and just look at the outline, how the outline of the islands have changed. But there is a gap, and not much three-dimensional shoreline changes have been conducted. And why 3D? Here's an example. If it might not look like there's any changes if you look at it from above. So in the 2D here, it's like the beach, the shoreline stays in the same area. But then when you look in a profile, the sand actually has shifted from closer to the vegetation line into the water, but you cannot see this in 2D. And then another example is here, where the shoreline, it looks like it has shifted further ocean side, but then it's just a shift from the sand from here over here. So this is just an example why 3D we can see a lot more detailed, like what's happening. And so for my research, the main aim is to gain a better understanding of atoll island morphodynamics. And then here, so I had three major objectives. The first is just to look like what people have done, what methods have they used, then how can I apply this method and incorporate new methods. And then the third one is to actually take this methodology and go to the atoll islands and measure the changes. So again, I showed this map earlier. So here's Heron Island. It's a small reef island on the Great Barrier Reef. We're doing a case pilot study, and then Ulithi Atoll is the atoll in Micronesia. Here just a brief workflow. So for Heron Island, there is LiDAR data available. In the Micronesia, we don't have any LiDAR data on the atolls. But so here we have LiDAR data. Then last year I collected, with the help of Anna Patricia and Andrea, we collected data on Heron Island. So we had a mobile laser scanner, then a terrestrial laser scanner and drones. And then so I created point clouds from all the different methods, and then doing a comparison how these different methods work. And we're doing the same again this year and compare the changes between the years. Here just some preliminary results. This is how the island looks from the air. And then here are all the equipment. So we have the GPS. We're using MLIT RS2 GNS receivers. We have the Regal 400. Then this is the GeoSLAM mobile laser scanner. And then we have the drone, the Mavic 3 multispectral. And then we're also using ground control points. Okay. Just here's a map of the how we distributed the ground control points. And then one of the other tests that we conducted, we had 2 different ground control points. You see here quite small ones and then bigger ones, and we also placed them in different substrates. So we had them over the beach rock, the sand, and then also here in the vegetated areas. And then we flew at different altitudes, so 60 meters and 100 meters. And yeah, of course, if you're flying like lower to the ground, 60 meters, you can see like the footprints that are not that visible on this one. And then when I created the digital elevation model, this is what it looks like. Again, here it's a lot more details than in the 100 meters. And so from the drone imagery, so we are flying in a lawnmower pattern, and then use the Agisoft to create the digital elevation model and the also mosaic. And then here's the digital elevation model. And so it was the main focus was the island, but we also tried to get as much of the reef as possible. So the drone was one thing, and then we used the laser scanner, so it's a mobile laser scanner. And in this one, you can't see it, but there's actually, we have a small camera that's on top, so we are also getting not just a regular point cloud, but a colorized point cloud. And we had to do 3 different circles, because this type of laser scanner, you have to start in one area, and you have to come back. So you have to do a circle, and it cannot be too long, so you cannot just walk around the island, which might take an hour. It ideally should only be like 20 to 30 minutes. So we did it in smaller pieces. So we started like here, walked here and back again, and then did another circle here, and then another here, and then merged them. And then here's just a little zoomed in area, and this is like what the profile looks like. And so this was just a pilot study. It was still a reef island, so it's very similar conditions than to the atoll island. But it was also remote, but not quite as remote as when we went to Micronesia. And so for Micronesia, it's again measuring the islands in 3D and looking at the changes. And similar to what I showed before, but here we'll be doing the 2D, so using the historic aerials and collecting field data and doing the 3D. And then that will be compared as well. And so last year we went from Guam to Yap Island by plane. And just a little bit about the island. So Yap Island is the island of the famous stone money. So they're using these, if you can see this big discs, as a currency. So even today, they're using regular dollars as well, US dollars, but they still have a big value. So even though they might be in a public area, people know exactly who this money belongs to. And so while we were on the island, we had to prepare to go to the remote island. So we had to buy supplies and gifts for the people we were visiting. And then we also had to ask permission from the governor. And then we went so here's Yap Island, so this is the high island. We had to go by little boat. It was like a 12-hour boat ride to the small island. And there's actually a small airport, so we were hoping to fly there. But just a few months before, they told us exactly during the time we had to do the field work, there were no planes going. So we had to change the plans and go by a little boat. So not quite a nice yacht, but we managed. And it's actually a fishing boat that we took to the island. And once you get to the island, this is the men's house, and we have some of the chiefs sitting in front, and then you have to go again and ask for permission, and you cannot just show up and say, hey, I'm going to do this. Like, they already knew we were coming, but we still had to ask, just for official permission then. And then the islands, here every island that is inhabited usually has a dispensary. And this is what it looks inside. You can see some, like medication. A lot of it is already out of date, but you can see how, people are very poor in these areas. And this is one of the pictures or the houses we lived in. And that was just, that's like a more modern house. It was built after a really big typhoon, went through the area. And so US Aid came in and provided housing for people. And you can see, similar to here, people also like using hammocks. Usually not to sleep at night, but just during the day. And so here's just one of our hosts, and she was sleeping in front of our room. So people usually just use mats. And this was our charging station. And we weren't sure how it's going to work once we're on the island, like if they have electricity and what kind of electricity. But we were very lucky. They actually had Australian outlets as well, so we could plug our equipment in. And then the life on the island might look similar to here. People cook outside, and it's often very like basic conditions. Here again. Oops. Yeah. And then here is the women's house. So they also they're weaving. Before I showed the men's house, and yeah, this is just for the women. Here again, the men's house, and then this is one of the houses they live in, and you can see everywhere because of the conditions they don't have usually running water. They collect water wherever they can and with whatever containers. So a lot of these are just buoys that washed up on the shore. Like you have a lot of trash that washes up. And then, here's another example of a house, and they also look like, I noticed some of the houses here, the mine houses look similar to this. Right? And then to the field survey, so we stayed on the main island, but then we visited a lot of the other islands within the atoll. And that was often challenging because we had to get all the equipment from the bigger boat to the smaller boat to get to the island. Wait. What's this? Yeah, you can see it was a challenge not to get the equipment wet. And And once we were on the island, we set up the base station. So this was the base station to fly the drone, the RTK drone. And then we also had another base station just for a GNSS survey. And then, if you remember, I showed like how we used different ground control points. These were the smaller ones. They were only like 30 by 30 centimeters, and they're actually quite good. Small, but they're also easy if you have like areas like on the rocks. It's because they have a little bit of a weight. We still weight them down, but they wouldn't just easily fly off. Bigger ones, like these, it was really hard to put them on a flat, like just on the rocks, because the wind can go underneath and then they just fly off. And so here we just put a lot of sand around it. And then this is one of our field team members. And so after we are flying the drone, we are surveying all of the ground control points. And then this is just an image of what a lot of the islands look like. And so they're very vegetated. So it's actually hard when you're flying the drone to put the ground control points in the island because it's just too much vegetation and you can't see them. So we usually just put them around on the beach. Oh, wait. It's another. So yeah, there are a lot of coconuts, and even the understory, it's really thick. And then, of course, you have a lot of ocean. And then here, there's also what I mentioned earlier with the trash. There's a lot of trash that just gets washed up on the islands. And so here it's just bottles, but often you find like flip-flops and all kinds of plastic waste. And so here's an overview of the island of Ulithi Atoll. And so the reason or how I chose the islands, we only had less than 2 weeks, actually 7 days on the 8 days on the island. So it was based on the size. Some islands are bigger than others. So it's like, it's better to do more smaller islands than one of the big islands. Then I also wanted to get islands with different exposures to the wind, and also if any interesting features. There's even mangroves inside the island, so we tried to include that. Some of them, they were just sandbars, so just try to get a different variety of features. And then, for example, we really wanted to go to this island over here because it's a very important turtle nesting ground. But just a week before we arrived to the island, we were told that there's a current taboo, so one of the higher chiefs died, and we couldn't, not just we, but nobody could access the island for several months, so we couldn't go there. So even if we said we're not touching anything, we're just flying the drone, we just could not. So you have to be, very flexible in, which island to go to, and the other thing was weather. If it was just too rainy, we couldn't fly the drone. So that was also a big, issue on some days. But still, I felt like we were very lucky to get that we covered that many islands. Like before you're going, you just, it's like as many islands we can survey, but once you're there, you just have to see what the conditions are. And so overall, I feel very lucky that, we got to do as many islands as we end up doing. And then some of the challenges, because I'm looking at changes of beaches. I want to fly or doing the surveys during low tide, so we only had usually a small window of 3 to 4 hours during the day where we could do it. Then again, what I mentioned, the weather is a big deterrent at points. If it's too windy or rainy, we cannot fly or use the equipment. And then I also mentioned the vegetation, that if it's the interior of the island is just too vegetated, we cannot have any ground control points. The equipment, it's just hard to bring the equipment sometimes on the island if it's very rough. And then just generally the logistics on the island, like getting to certain islands, having somebody that has a small boat that can bring us, and in the islands don't have any internet. So for example, the drones, you have to load all the data on the imagery before you leave, and so once we're there, there's nothing to be done. Even it's like, like how does this work? It's like if you didn't download it before, you have to figure it out, so that can be a big challenge. And then we thought birds might be a challenge, like what I showed earlier, that a lot of these islands have many, many birds. But when we were flying it, I mean, sometimes we saw some birds, but they were never like attacking the drone, and so we were very lucky in that way. And here just the results. I'll just go briefly through them. So here I concentrated, I used this island because I could see on the imagery, the sandbar, it's very dynamic, so it changes a lot. And then this is the southernmost island. I tried not just to focus on the main island, but if we had time, try to get as much of the reeflet as well to see how that is changing. And this was just a sandbar, and you can see the waves around it. This was actually kind of dangerous when we went there because the waves were really, it was really rough day. And then this is just this area satellite imagery. I didn't have the ortho mosaic, but this was the biggest island we surveyed. And these are 2 islands. So sometimes when they were really close together, we could do 2 islands on one day. And you can't really see it much here, but this island was a lot bigger before. So there's a lot of changes happening there. So I also tried to, another researcher already looked at the changes before. So I really wanted to go to it and do the 3D modeling there. And that's the last one with the mangroves. And that was it. So it was quite successful. So hopefully we can do this, go back to the same islands this year than we did last year. And this was in the middle is Larry. He's a traditional master navigator. So in the islands, there's a lot of still navigation is very important. So they're making their own traditional canoes, and they're navigating by the stars. But it's as many things, like a lot of the traditional knowledge is dying out, so there are not many navigators anymore. But he's one of them, and I was able to, have him for the project. So he was helping and being like because he's from one of the islands, to help us just translate and help just with the customs. And that's it. Thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
Thank you for your presentation. My question is regarding your vertical datum for the, because I guess you don't have any tidal gauge on those islands, and since you are focused, or you will be focused on shoreline, you will need to, to set that datum. And the other was regarding the vegetation. If you were able to get the ground elevation in those locations, or how do you deal with that?
Like the interior of the island?
Yeah, in the interior of that.
Okay. Yeah, so the first one, the vertical datum, that is a challenge because, there's no tide gauges on any of the islands. And so right now, I'm just using the geoid models. And I tried to get some of the micro atolls just to get the elevation of these as a proxy. But that is definitely a challenge. And with the interior of the islands, so when we were with the drone, we're getting the whole island, right? But it's sometimes hard to see underneath, because of the vegetation. And so when I was walking around with the laser scanner, whenever there was a little opening in the canopy and I could walk in, I would always go in as far as I could. But also if it's too dense, then I cannot really walk around because the laser scanner, it's going to be not good data. Or even when you're walking and then there was a little ridge, I was trying to just get it as high as possible to get as much, at least from the beach area. But the very interior, that's if it's highly vegetated, we can just estimate the elevation. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. And my question is that if you are planning to use another variable to relate maybe, I don't know, vegetation, in order to track all these changes in the coast, not only coastal erosion.
So the question is if I'm looking at other variables like vegetation.
And another variable.
Very good question. I am, and the reason actually I bought the drone, it's a multispectral drone. I might not be able to focus on that specifically, but for future references to also look at the vegetation. But for now, what I am looking is just the vegetation. I call it height, how that changes. Because usually when you have really high trees right on the shoreline, that means area often has eroded, right? And so, I will be looking at that.
And during your research, have you heard or found another atoll that it was just erosioned so fast? I mean, you said, my research is really available because that could happen if, it will happen naturally, but we can track all these changes with my research.
So not atolls, but some of the islands, there is evidence even from the last 30, 40 years where some islands have totally disappeared and some islands have disappeared and others have were born, were created. But because right now I can only go in the islands last year and this year, it's only smaller changes, right? So if there's a big, maybe a typhoon or something coming through, we might be able to see, some changes, but I don't have the data yet for this year. So we'll see how much, changes I can see. But with the satellite imagery and the historic images, there's evidence that some islands, even on Ulithi Atoll, where I'm doing my research, that have, that were born.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I just have, a lot of questions, actually. So the official language of each of the islands is different, or all the official language for all the islands is English?
Yeah, no, it is different. Like they all have their
Their
own
own language.
language. Yeah.
So you were with a translator, or you speak all the languages?
No. So on Guam, the official language is English, but also Chamorro, the indigenous language. And so the people of Guam and all of the Mariana Islands, they have one language, Chamorro. But then the other islands, they have sometimes one, sometimes even more languages on the main island and then the outer islands. But that was the reason. The last picture that I showed with our
With your guide.
friend is that here, Larry, the navigator, he understands the language. So that's also a reason why we brought him, because it's the culture, it's very intricate. It's very, as an outsider, it's really hard to, navigate it. And so it was very helpful to have him to translate, even though people, most people can at least understand or speak some English, but it's just like the culture, like how do you behave, how do you do certain things, and even ask for permission. It was very, very, like, not just helpful, but crucial to have some, like a local with us. And because these islands, they don't have like a hotel or you can just call and book, like, can I book a room? Like, you have to know people and, they have to have your trust that you can go there.
Another question is, do you notice or experience or talk with them? Are they concerned about the rising of the sea level? Is something that they are worried about, and they associate that with global warming, or is just like a natural cycle for them, or what's their perception about that issue?
Yeah. It seems like, I mean, they have outsiders coming in and talking to them. So they all heard about climate change, and so they're all aware of it. But they definitely, know, like, oh yeah, this area was, a lot bigger before, but now the sand shifted from here over there. But they're very in tune with the environment, and so they usually know, oh yeah, during the summer the sand is over here, during the winter it's here, and then or dry and rainy season. So it's how it's shifting, and they're quite aware of it.
And the last question. So what's the main trade? They fish, how they, I mean, they grow their own food there. They just survive with coconuts and fish.
Yeah, well, fishing is a very, important part of the culture, and then they do grow some food like taro. They have coconuts, but taro is one of the main staples. And then a lot of these islands, because they belong to the bigger island, they have like every few months they have a big ship that goes to all the islands, and then it drops like rice and certain staples like. So they really love rice, they love sugar, they love coffee. So when outsiders come, like these are the things they really want. And actually when we were going there, because what I mentioned, we were supposed to go by plane, but the plane didn't go for like 2 months. And so they didn't get a lot of the supplies. So they were like crazy for rice. And it was even the boat, because we had a lot of space, so many people that live on the main island, they made packages to send to their family. And so so they do get these things from the main island, and it's not just that they're independent. So so there's some local food, but it's still supplemented by especially I think rice and any other rice is probably the main. Yeah. And they're always happy. Like when we go there, we're happy to eat like fresh fish, right? It's like, yeah, like we get fish. And they're just like, they prefer the canned fish because it's special than getting the fresh one. So it's a good exchange for us and for them. But yeah. Thank you.
Maybe share how some of the cultural aspects affected your fieldwork.
What are you thinking? Because the taboo I was talking about.
Sunday.
Oh, okay, yeah, there was another thing. Okay, so we went to one of the islands we stayed on, and we had this one local guy who had a small boat, right? Because the we came, it was too big to go really close to the island. So you still needed, sometimes it's just maybe 100 meters or 200 meters, but it's too big to bring your equipment, right? Like you can't, like maybe you can swim, but not with the equipment, like the drones. And so we needed that one guy, and this was the only guy who had the boat on the island. So we really relied on him, and he was very difficult to work with. And so it was the first few days, it was raining, it was really windy. So one time it's like, oh, it looks good. So we started the survey, and just when I was coming back, I needed like 3 more minutes, and it started raining. So the data was, I could not use the data. And so we really wanted to work on a Sunday. And people in the islands, they are, traditionally, of course, they had their own beliefs, but now most of them are Catholic. And so we asked the guy, like, is it okay, can you work on Sunday? Because the weather started getting better, but it was a Sunday. And so I asked him, and he said, oh, sorry, I cannot work. It's like, okay. So, and then I asked our friend, is like, oh, can you ask him, maybe he's, we can convince him. And we even like paid him, and then he said, okay, we can do it. And then Sunday comes, the weather was really good. I was like, yeah, we can, do it, because we only had very limited time. So, and then working with the tide, it's very like complicated. And then Sunday he comes like, I'm so sorry, no work Sunday. I was like, oh. So there was just nothing you can do, right? You're on the island, rely on one person, and if he's not willing to work, then and so we just ended up going, to another island then. But so it can be very difficult at times.
So you said this. Working, yeah. So you said this year you're going back, and so that's going to be twice. Are you going to go more, or is there other people, or do the locals also have way to help your research? Saying, okay, I don't know, send you some proxy. I mean, they're never going to do as good as the drones, of course, but
so we're going back this year, and I don't know. I'm pretty sure we won't be able to go to all the islands again, because it's just, again, with the weather, and we just don't know. But that's the ideal situation. And then I do have to finish my PhD soon, so I cannot continue. It's also a lot of money to get to the islands. I mean, once you're on the island, people are very friendly, and they feed you, and of course you bring some. Yeah, except Sunday. Well, they still feed you, but not. I did get a big a grant to pay for it, but also the grant is running out this year, so I have to use it up. But the idea is to, in the future, apply for more grants and maybe go back in a few years and expand it. But just for my PhD, it's just, just now. And I cannot, it's really hard when you can ask people, like, and even maybe pay them a little bit and say, oh, can you take a picture every year and every week or month or something? But then there's like, yeah, but it's just hard to, like, if you have like electronics, like, with the humidity, they don't have air condition or something, then they might not have the battery, or they don't have money to pay for the power. And a lot of these islands have a solar system, so they do have power, but it's, limited. It's not always reliable. And it was actually interesting. So the island we stayed on, it had solar. The neighbor island, which is the bigger island that has the little airstrip, they have diesel. And so, but often the diesel, they run out of diesel, because if the boat is not coming and doesn't supply, then they don't have power. But the one with the solar, the sun is usually, is always there. Of course, the system can break down, but it's a lot more reliable. So often the people with the better system, the diesel, they have refrigerators, they put the fish in, but then if it runs out, they have to ask their cousins on the other island to, like, oh, can you, put this in the refrigerator? So it's very interesting, just the life on the island. And any other questions? No? Well, thank you so much. Okay.
The question is, sorry, I lost the question. Yeah, the question is, will you do some analysis with a multispectral data?
Not for my PhD, but that will be like, so I am taking the pictures, like the multispectral pictures, but for future research, to go back and do like vegetation mapping. Well, thank you so much. No, that's okay.